Hey everybody, I recently finished playing through Dispatch and I had a lot of fun with it, but one thing kept bugging me. The game keeps telling you that Mecha Man, or Robert Robertson, doesn't have powers, but I don't think that's true. Robert gets his ass kicked or blown up in one form or another quite a bit in this story, but each time he displays durability and wound recovery that far exceeds that of a normal human. To prove my point, let's go through some of these incidents in order, and yes, there will be spoilers, you've been warned. The game starts with an extended fight sequence between Mecha Man and Shroud's lackeys, especially Toxic. I'm going to extend some leeway when Robert's in the mech, even though some of these hits and falls look like they would do significant damage to both the suit and occupant. Let's allow that while the suit is functioning, there may be some kind of dampening system that reduces pilot injury. However, it's highly doubtful that system would still be in operation when the bomb explodes mid-flight and Mecha Man free falls what looks to be at least several thousand feet. Now, in the game's defense, this first incident does seem to result in severe injuries. Robert's in an extended coma and appears at the press conference wearing a sling. Still, the fact that he survives the explosion and crash at all means that either the suit still had at least partially functioning dampening or that Robert has superhuman durability. Let's keep going. The second example comes right after the press conference, when Robert decides to pick a fight with 4 thugs robbing an electronics store, even though his left arm is still in a sling. Despite getting a couple shots in, Robert takes a decent beating here, getting punched, kicked, and even stomped on before Blonde Blazer swoops in to save the day. Post-fight, Robert looks to be in rough shape. His left shoulder looks badly dislocated, and keep in mind this was the same arm that was in a sling 2 minutes ago. Most people would probably go to the hospital here, but not Robert. Blonde Blazer pops the shoulder back in, and his arm function seems back to normal with no pain, previous injury and sling notwithstanding. Look at Robert's face here. There's quite a bit of blood and bruising, but instead of going to a hospital like a normal person, he goes with Blonde Blazer to a bar. However, by the time they reach the bar, his face is fully healed. I can see Robert cleaning up the blood, but how are the bruises already gone? Following a near bar fight, in which Robert seems to have no concern for his personal safety, the two fly up to a billboard. Between both scenes, Robert shows no pain or discomfort and acts totally normal. Here's another close-up of his face, with no blood, cuts, or bruising whatsoever. The following morning, when Blonde Blazer very professionally asks Robert to strip down in front of an obviously reflective window at the SDN offices, we do see that he has a number of bruises and scars across his chest and back. So Robert's healing abilities have at least cosmetic limitations for very serious injuries. This next example is more minor, but it's in line with the trend, so I'll cover it briefly. While sitting up quickly, Man accidentally embeds shards of glass in Robert's chest in the SDN parking lot. These don't look very deep, but Robert is completely unfazed, and instead of having them looked at by a medical professional, he picks them out on his own in the SDN bathroom. Also note that as Robert picks the glass out, there's very little bleeding and the skin below already seems basically healed. As we saw earlier and will continue to see, Robert takes numerous unnecessary risks to his own safety, provoking flambe a second time in the SDN break room and lifting weights without a spotter. There's an especially egregious example of this later that we'll get to. You can make an alternative argument for these, that Robert thinks he has nothing to live for and doesn't care about his own safety, and that may be valid. But isn't this also how somebody would act if they knew they had superhuman durability and wound recovery? Of course, both can be true at once. Off topic, Robert may also be a bit of a psychopath. After going on the dinner date with Blonde Blazer / Mandy, she approaches Robert in the locker room, and, well, I'll just play the whole clip here.
I just had a great time the other night and wanted to see if maybe you want to do a real date sometime?
Was it the plastic utensils or the man puking water on the windows that made that less real?
There were many contributing factors.
Would that be a date with Blonde Blazer or Mandy?
Oh, I don't know. Which would you prefer? And that's not a trap. I'm both of them. That sounded weird out loud, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, listen, we work together. Let's put a pin in this.
Okay. Have a good shift.
I'm with Blonde Blazer on this one. The next incident is the brawl at the Sardine, which starts with Robert getting tossed across the bar by Armstrong. As he stands up, he gets smacked across the back of the head with a pool cue. That might end the night for most people, but not Robert. Let's take a look at the shots he takes here. Thrown off the back of Armstrong to the floor, hit repeatedly by this insect-armed guy, punched in the groin by Punch-Up, choked by this guy whose finger he bites off, thrown against the bathroom mirror by the same guy, and finally tossed to the floor by Armstrong again before they manage to wrap up the brawl. As usual, Robert follows up this beating not with a trip to the ER, but rather a 3 a.m. taco run, in which he has a dirty shirt and a couple bruises but otherwise seems no worse for wear. Let's move on to incident number 5. While testing a prototype Astral pulse, the suit malfunctions and explodes while Robert's inside. From the look of this explosion, it does look like this is mostly outwards and not inwards. Still, you have to think this would cause significant injury to the pilot. For once, Robert actually gets medical attention, but I'm sure it'll come as no surprise that he's in good shape and sustained no permanent injuries. In fact, even though he's bigger and stronger, Royd seems to be in much worse shape from this incident. Despite Chase telling him to take the day off, which seems like the bare minimum, Robert gets out of bed, disconnects his leads, and heads back to his desk to keep working. When Blonde Blazer asks, Robert says he's completely fine and reveals that having a mech suit explode around him only results in him being out of action for several hours. By the way, bonus psychopath points here if you choose not to forgive Vizzy.
Wow. You've convinced me. Yeah, I think we're done.
Okay. Sorry for f***ing your life up again.
Well, not much life left to f*** up, so you should probably go unless you want to drown my dog on the way out.
Okay, incident number 6. Robert makes the definitely not reckless decision to drink at the Sardine by himself. The bartender makes him mad, so Robert smashes his drink glass in his hand. This causes bleeding, but no pain or concern whatsoever. Of course, it turns out this whole setup was a trap, and Shroud knew that Robert would be dumb, reckless, or durable enough to go to a villain bar by himself, especially after what happened the last time he was here. Robert ends up getting punched in the head by either Sonar or Coupe, depending on who he cut earlier. The next scene has Robert hanging upside down and being interrogated by Shroud and the former team member. If it's Sonar, Robert gets punched a number of times, although these are likely much more damaging punches than from a normal human. If it's Coupe, she uses her blades to cut him, which might be even more damaging. Blonde Blazer comes to the rescue again, although this time Robert does seem to be in legitimate pain. But instead of medical care, Blazer flies him back to a billboard, which seems to be her preferred conversation location. Robert still has blood on his face and is holding his side, so his recovery doesn't seem as fast in this case. In fact, it looks like he gets worse as the scene unfolds. His left eye, which looked fine previously, is now swollen shut when he reaches up for Blazer to take him back to work. However, during the flight to the SDN office, Robert experiences massive improvement. See here, when he gets his coffee and walks to his desk, he has some bruises, but he's moving totally fine. But Robert's night is just getting started. He gets into another fight with Thumbstick, who stabs him in the shoulder as they both fall to the ground. The next phase of the fight moves Robert inside of his mech, and again, I'll give some leniency here in terms of pilot protection. But while piloting his mech, Robert doesn't move or act like someone who was just beat within an inch of his life by Shroud. And for most of the fight, he gets tossed around like a ragdoll, taking hit after hit. When it's over, and Robert gets out of the suit to talk to Shroud, he actually looks better than when the fight started. Is it possible that he healed during all that? Anyways, as you probably know, that pretty much wraps up the story. In case it wasn't obvious, this video is mostly made in jest. I think a lot of the scene-to-scene healing can probably be chalked up to art continuity issues or conscious choices. The devs might have figured that people would get tired of seeing Robert covered in cuts and bruises and limping in every scene, and they were probably right about that. So does Robert Robertson have durability and healing capabilities beyond that of a normal human? I'll leave it for you to decide. As always, thanks for watching, and special thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.